In the summer of 2023, a geological survey team working in the remote Pampas of northern Argentina uncovered something that should not have existed. The team had been tasked with mapping underground water reserves near the town of San Carlos de Bariloche using advanced satellite imaging and synthetic aperture radar. Their mission was purely practical. Argentina's growing agricultural and energy demands required new aquifers, and the Pampas, vast and sparsely populated, were an ideal target for study. What appeared on their screens, however, was not water. Beneath a wide stretch of seemingly untouched grassland was a geometric anomaly, a long, straight compression of earth nearly 1,200 meters in length. The shape was too precise to be natural. Vegetation above it grew differently, thinner in some places, denser in others, revealing patterns invisible from ground level. At its eastern end was a dense mass buried beneath soil and roots, something metallic, irregular, heavy. To anyone trained to recognize human-made structures, the implication was immediate. This was not geology. It was infrastructure. What the team had found was an airstrip. Not abandoned recently, not partially reclaimed, but erased so thoroughly by time that it had remained invisible for nearly 8 decades. And buried at its end, fused into the earth itself, were the corroded remains of a Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter aircraft. The discovery would unravel a story that reached back to the final days of the Second World War and expose one of the quietest, loneliest, and most unsettling afterlives of the Nazi era. The aircraft's identification markings, once excavated and reconstructed, led investigators to a name that history had closed long ago. Oberleutnant Friedrich von Holler, a Luftwaffe fighter ace credited with 73 confirmed aerial victories. A man officially listed as missing in April 1945. Presumed dead. Forgotten. He had not died in the skies over Europe. He had escaped. And he had lived, flown, and ultimately died alone in the shadow of the Andes. Friedrich von Holler was born in 1920 in Königsberg, then part of East Prussia, a city erased by the war and reborn under Soviet rule as Kaliningrad. His family belonged to the minor aristocracy, bearing an old name but little wealth. His father worked as a civil administrator, his mother maintained the household, and like many German families of the interwar period, they lived with the lingering humiliation of defeat in 1918 and the instability of the Weimar years. Von Holler grew up in a Germany obsessed with restoration. When the Nazi regime began openly rebuilding the military in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles, aviation became one of its most glamorous symbols. Aircraft represented modernity, power, and escape from the constraints of the past. For a young man with sharp reflexes and a restless mind, the cockpit offered both purpose and transcendence. In 1938, at 18 years old, Friedrich von Holler joined the Luftwaffe. His instructors quickly noted his exceptional spatial awareness and reaction time. He was not flamboyant, not aggressive in temperament, but precise. He flew as if calculation came naturally to him, as if the aircraft were an extension of his nervous system rather than a machine he operated. By the time war broke out in September 1939, he was fully trained and assigned to Jagdgeschwader 52, a fighter wing that would go on to become the highest-scoring unit in the history of aerial warfare. He recorded his first kill during the Battle of France in May 1940, shooting down a French Marine Saulnier fighter over the Ardennes. In a letter to his mother, he described the experience not as triumph, but as shock. The exhilaration came later. First came disbelief that a life could end so suddenly, erased by a few seconds of gunfire. That disbelief did not last. Von Holler flew during the Battle of Britain and was shot down over Kent in August 1940, suffering burns that kept him grounded for weeks. He returned to service and was reassigned east in 1941, where the scale of the war expanded beyond anything previously imaginable. On the Eastern Front, the Luftwaffe faced a massive but initially disorganized Soviet Air Force. Skilled German pilots accumulated victories at rates unheard of in the West. By the end of 1942, von Holler had 41 confirmed kills and had been awarded the Knight's Cross. By mid-Air 1944, his total stood at 73. Those who flew with him described a man who was competent, reliable, and emotionally distant. He did not boast. He did not preach ideology. He did not drink excessively or chase recognition. In a culture where fighter aces often cultivated mythic personas, von Holler remained opaque. Respected, but not loved. A man you trusted with your life in the air, but not one you felt close to on the ground. As Germany's fortunes collapsed, skill no longer mattered. Fuel shortages grounded aircraft. Replacement pilots were poorly trained. Soviet numerical superiority became overwhelming. By early 1945, Jagdgeschwader 52 had been withdrawn to airfields in Austria and southern Germany. The unit was hollowed out, surviving on inertia and habit rather than hope. The last confirmed record of Friedrich von Holler in German military archives dates to April 29, 1945, at an airfield near Innsbruck. Fellow pilots later testified that they were informed the chain of command had effectively collapsed. Each man would have to decide his own fate. Surrender. Flee. Disappear. Von Holler chose disappearance. What followed was not heroism, nor defiance, but logistics. Networks already existed to move people out of Europe. The ratlines, as they would later be called, were not chaotic escape routes but structured systems involving sympathetic clergy, former SS officers, intelligence agencies, and governments willing to look the other way. Argentina under Juan Perón was particularly receptive. It offered distance, ambiguity, and a large German-speaking community that could absorb newcomers without questions. By late 1947, Friedrich von Holler arrived in Argentina under an assumed identity. He passed through Buenos Aires, working quietly within the German expatriate community, learning how to live without insignia, rank, or recognition. But anonymity did not suit him. Flight had been his identity. Without it, he was nothing. Within 2 years, he relocated south to San Carlos de Bariloche, a town nestled in the Patagonian Andes that had become a discreet haven for German émigrés. Some were innocent refugees. Others were men like him. Skilled, compromised, and unwilling to return home. What distinguished von Holler was his refusal to let go of the sky. Somehow, through means that remain unclear, he acquired a Messerschmitt Bf 109, the same aircraft type he had flown in combat. Whether it was purchased from surplus stock exported during the war, smuggled in parts through ratline channels, or assembled from multiple airframes will likely never be known. What is known is that by 1950 he had secured remote land roughly 40 kilometers from Bariloche and began constructing his own airstrip. The location was chosen carefully. Isolated. Difficult to access. Shielded by terrain and distance rather than secrecy alone. He compacted the earth by hand and with borrowed machinery, creating a runway just long enough to accommodate the fighter's landing requirements. He built a crude hangar from corrugated metal and timber. A small dwelling. Nothing more. To the few locals who encountered him, he was a quiet man with a German accent, polite but reserved. He paid in cash. He did not invite questions. When asked about his past, he spoke vaguely of business losses and a desire for solitude. No one reported him. No one pressed. For years, Friedrich von Holler flew alone over the Argentine wilderness. No missions. No enemies. No formations. Just endless sky and empty land. What drove him to do this remains unknowable. Perhaps it was nostalgia. Perhaps it was compulsion. Perhaps it was the only way he knew how to exist. The cockpit was the one place where his past and present could coexist without contradiction. In the air, he was not a fugitive. He was simply a pilot. The end came in June 1953. The aircraft took off from the strip and never returned. Evidence suggests the crash occurred on or near the runway itself. The impact was violent enough to kill von Holler instantly and bury much of the airframe into the soft earth. There was no fire. No explosion. Just sudden silence. Someone found the wreckage. Instead of reporting it, they buried it. The plane was pushed into a shallow depression. Earth and vegetation were piled over it. No marker was placed. No record filed. Whoever did this understood what they were hiding and why. Over decades, the Pampas erased the disturbance. Grass reclaimed the soil. The hangar collapsed. The dwelling disintegrated. Ownership records shifted through shell identities. By the time Nazi hunters scoured Argentina in the 1970s, there was nothing to find. Until technology intervened. When excavation began in 2023, the aircraft was badly corroded but identifiable. Serial numbers traced it back to Luftwaffe records. Human remains recovered from the cockpit matched the profile of a man in his early 30s. DNA analysis confirmed his identity through distant relatives in Germany. The investigation revealed something unsettling. The aircraft showed no evidence of mechanical failure. Control surfaces were intact. The engine had been functioning. The crash profile suggested controlled flight into terrain. Accident or intention? Both interpretations remain plausible. A moment of misjudgment. A deliberate end. A man neither fully choosing life nor death. Letters recovered from German archives revealed correspondence between von Holler and his mother until her death in 1951. He claimed to be living in Switzerland, working as a commercial pilot, unable to return home due to bureaucratic obstacles. The lies were elaborate. Protective. Self-deceptive. In truth, he was alone in a foreign land, flying a relic of a defeated regime over empty grasslands, unable to return and unwilling to stop. His remains were eventually returned to Germany. Buried quietly. No honors. No ceremony. Closure without absolution. The airstrip remains preserved. A marker stands without judgment. And the sky above it is unchanged. History often ends wars with treaties and dates. Lives do not end so neatly. They unravel slowly, across continents and decades. Friedrich von Holler carried the war with him to Argentina, buried it with himself, and waited 70 years to be found. The land remembered. And now, so do we.